Hello and welcome to her revenge arc. My name is Alara, and tonight I want to tell you a story. It's a story about the quiet corrosion of trust, the architecture of deceit, and the beautiful, satisfying mathematics of justice. It's a story about my husband, my best friend, and a bankruptcy that never was. So find a comfortable place, dim the lights, and listen closely. Because sometimes the most devastating storms begin with the gentlest of breezes. They say love is blind, but I don't think that's quite right. Love isn't blind. It's a selective filter. It softens the sharp edges, colors the gray patches with gold, and mutes the dissonant notes into a tolerable hum. For 12 years I lived inside that beautiful filtered world with my husband, Julian. Our life was a carefully curated masterpiece. We had the brownstone in the city with ivy crawling up the brick, the weekend home by the lake that smelled of pine and damp earth, the circle of friends who were successful and witty and always brought the right kind of wine to dinner parties. On paper, and indeed in most of the photographs that filled our albums, we were the couple everyone wanted to be. Julian was the architect of this life, both literally and figuratively. He was a partner at a prestigious architectural firm, a man who could command a room with his quiet confidence and a smile that could disarm armies. I fell in love with that confidence. I was a freelance art historian, a quieter soul, content to live in the world of books and canvases. I adored the way he saw the world as a series of structures and systems to be understood, improved, and mastered. He brought order to my creative chaos. He was my foundation, my support beam, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the investments were sound, while I painted our world with color and warmth. I remember the early years, the ones before the serious money came. We'd spend Saturdays exploring flea markets, looking for forgotten treasures. He had an eye for furniture with good bones, and I had an eye for art with a soul. Our first apartment was a mosaic of our shared discoveries. He once spent a whole weekend restoring a dilapidated mid-century armchair he'd bought for $10. I remember watching him, his brow furrowed in concentration, his hands, usually busy with blueprints and rulers, now meticulously sanding wood and stretching fabric. That night, he pulled me onto his lap in the newly finished chair and said, "See, Alara? Anything can be rebuilt. You just need to see the potential underneath the damage." I held those words close to my heart for a long, long time. They became a mantra for our marriage. As his career soared, our flea market days were replaced by gallery openings and charity galas. The $10 chair was moved to a guest room, replaced by a sleek Italian leather sofa that cost more than our first car. The change was gradual, almost imperceptible. Julian's talk shifted from our future to my legacy. The late nights at the office became more frequent, his presence at home more of a fleeting shadow. When he was there, he was often distracted, his mind miles away, crunching numbers or navigating corporate politics. I told myself this was the price of success. I was the supportive wife, the role I had chosen and cherished. I managed our homes, I hosted his clients, I smoothed over his social absences with practiced grace. I was the silent partner in the firm of Julian Hayes. I didn't mind. I loved him, and I believed in the life we were building. I didn't see the cracks forming in the foundation because I was too busy polishing the marble floors. The first tremor was subtle. It was a Tuesday evening. I was preparing dinner, a cocoa vin that had been simmering for hours, filling the house with a rich, savory aroma. Julian was late, which wasn't unusual. But when he finally walked in, the familiar scent of his cologne was laced with something else, the sharp, acrid smell of fear. He didn't greet me with a kiss. He just dropped his briefcase by the door, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the house. He loosened his tie and walked straight to the bar, pouring himself a generous measure of scotch. "Rough day." He stared into the amber liquid, swirling it in his glass. "You could say that," he murmured. "The market is volatile." That was the first time he used that word. Volatile. It would soon become a regular part of his vocabulary. Over the next few months, the signs of volatility grew more pronounced. There were hushed, tense phone calls he would take in his study with the door closed. There were stacks of financial documents on his desk that he would quickly cover if I walked in. The confident smile that once disarmed me was replaced by a tight, strained line. He lost weight. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. I tried to be the anchor in his storm. "Talk to me, Julian," I would plead. "We're a team. Whatever it is, we can face it together." "You don't understand, Alara," he'd snap, his voice raw with the frustration I didn't recognize. "This is high-level stuff. It's complicated. I'm trying to protect you from it." Protect me. That was the phrase he used. It sounded noble, chivalrous even, but it felt like a door being shut in my face. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like an outsider in my own home. The life he was protecting me from was my life too. The assets he was worried about were our assets, weren't they? The financial strain began to manifest in tangible ways. He suggested we sell the lake house. "It's an unnecessary expense, an indulgence we can't afford right now," he argued. I was heartbroken. That house was my sanctuary, the place where the silence was filled with the lapping of water and the call of loons. Not the hum of a city that never slept. But for him, for us, I agreed. I packed up our memories, photo albums, and the worn-out paperbacks I kept by the bedside, and I didn't shed a tear until the new owner's car pulled into the driveway. Next came the art. My art. A small collection I had carefully acquired over the years, pieces that spoke to me, that I had researched and loved. He said we needed the liquidity. He found a private buyer who, he claimed, gave us a generous price. I never saw the paperwork. I just watched as strangers came into our home and carefully wrapped canvases that felt like pieces of my own soul, carrying them out into a waiting van. With each sacrifice, I felt a piece of myself being carved away. The filter of love was beginning to fray at the edges. Through the gaps, I could see a man I didn't quite know. A man who was cold, distant, and desperate. My heart ached for him, for the man he used to be, for the us that was dissolving like sand through my fingers. The breaking point, the moment the entire structure came crashing down, arrived on a gray, rainy Wednesday. It was our 15th anniversary. I had foolishly hoped for a reprieve, a small spark of the old Julian. I'd made reservations at the little French bistro where he had first told me he loved me. I bought a new dress, a deep sapphire blue that he always said brought out the color of my eyes. He came home early for once. But he wasn't carrying flowers. He was carrying a thick, menacing-looking manila envelope. He didn't even seem to notice my dress or the hopeful look on my face. He sat me down on the expensive Italian sofa that had replaced our $10 armchair. The rain hammered against the window panes, a mournful drumbeat to the death of our marriage. "Alara," he began, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. "There's no easy way to say this. The company, it's over. We've been mismanaged from the inside. Bad investments, embezzlement from a junior partner, it's a catastrophe." I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. "What do you mean, over?" "I mean bankrupt, Alara. We're going to lose everything. The firm is folding. The creditors are going to take the house, the car, everything." He took a deep, shaky breath. A masterful performance of a broken man. "I've lost it all." My first instinct was to reach for him, to comfort him. The supportive wife, programmed over a decade of devotion. "No, Julian," I said, my voice trembling. "We haven't lost everything. We have each other. We can rebuild. We've done it before. Remember the armchair? Anything can be rebuilt." He flinched at the mention of the armchair, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He shook his head slowly. "No, Alara. You don't understand. This is different. I can't drag you down with me. It wouldn't be fair to you." And then came the final fatal blow. "I think we should get a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, colder and harder than the rain outside. Divorce. It was a word from another language, from another life. It didn't belong in our house, on our Italian sofa. "What?" I whispered. The sound was so small I wasn't sure I'd said it aloud. "It's the only way to protect you," he said, his gaze fixed on a point over my shoulder. He couldn't even look at me. "If we separate, the creditors can't come after your future earnings. You'll be free of this mess. You can start over. It's the most selfless thing I can do for you right now. Selfless. He called this act of ultimate abandonment selfless. He was framing the amputation of our shared life as a kindness. The filter of love didn't just fray. It disintegrated into dust. And in its place, a cold, clear, high-definition reality snapped into focus. I saw him then. I really saw him for the first time in years. Not the charming architect, not the beleaguered husband, but a stranger. A very convincing actor who had been rehearsing this scene for months. The calculated despair, the feigned self-sacrifice, it was all a lie. I didn't know how I knew, but a certainty settled deep in my bones. A cold, hard stone of truth in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a strategy. He was faking it. He was faking the bankruptcy to leave me with nothing. He was orchestrating a controlled demolition of our marriage so he could walk away from the rubble with his pockets full, leaving me buried beneath it. All my sacrifices, the lake house, the art, my unwavering support, they weren't contributions to our shared struggle. They were simply assets he was liquidating before the final act. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange, chilling calm washed over me. The part of me that loved him died in that moment. And in its place, something new and steely was forged. I looked at this man I had shared my bed with for 12 years, and I felt nothing but a profound and icy clarity. I see, I said, my voice even. The calmness in my tone seemed to unnerve him more than tears would have. He had expected a hysterical, heartbroken woman. He was not prepared for this quiet composure. I've already retained a lawyer, he continued, pushing forward, eager to get through his script. He's the best. A real shark. He'll handle everything, make it as painless as possible. We'll file for bankruptcy, dissolve the assets, what little is left, and finalize the divorce. It's cleaner this way. I nodded slowly, my mind working, connecting dots I hadn't even seen before. The closed-door phone calls, the hidden documents. It was all a meticulously planned escape. He thought he was so clever. He thought he had accounted for every variable. He thought I was just a soft-hearted art historian who wouldn't understand the complexities of finance and law. He saw me as a liability to be managed, a problem to be solved. He had made his first mistake. His second, far more critical mistake was about to be revealed. What's the lawyer's name? I asked, my tone purely conversational. He waved a dismissive hand, a gesture of supreme arrogance. You wouldn't know her. She's a top-tier divorce attorney, specializes in high-asset cases like this one used to be. Name's Clara Vance. She'll be in touch. Clara Vance. The name hit me not like a sound but like a physical force. The world, which had been tilting, suddenly snapped perfectly, brutally upright. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the frantic drumming of the rain, the sound of my own steady heartbeat in my ears. Clara Vance. My Clara. The Clara I'd met in a dusty art history elective in college. The Clara who had held my hair back after too much cheap wine on my 21st birthday. The Clara who was the maid of honor at my wedding, who had given a speech so beautiful and funny it made Julian weep. The Clara who had become one of the sharpest, most ruthless, and most loyal people I had ever known. My best friend of 20 years. Julian looked at me, a flicker of impatience on his face. He was waiting for my breakdown, for the tears, for the pleading. He was waiting for the woman he thought he had married. He didn't know that woman had just left the room. I gave him a small, slow smile. It didn't reach my eyes. Okay, Julian, I said softly. Let her call me. He saw the smile and misinterpreted it as dazed acceptance, as shock. The condescending pity returned to his eyes. It'll be for the best, Delara. You'll see. Oh, I would see. And soon so would he. He thought he had hired a shark to tear me apart. He had no idea he had just handed me the keys to the entire aquarium. The game was on, and he had just taught me the rules. Understand That night I didn't sleep in our bed. I couldn't bear the thought of lying next to him, of breathing the same air as his deceit. I took a blanket and curled up on the Italian sofa where my marriage had been executed. The room was dark, but my mind was brilliantly, terrifyingly lit. I replayed every conversation, every sacrifice, every tense moment from the past year. What had felt like a shared tragedy now reassembled itself into a cold, calculated conspiracy. He wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to erase me from the life I had helped build. He wanted to walk away with the spoils of our 12 years together, leaving me with nothing but the performance of his sympathy. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The cruelty of using my love and trust as weapons against me was a wound deeper than any financial loss. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. A text from a number I knew as well as my own. Clara. Just got a call from a Julian Hayes. Retainer signed. I need to talk to you. Call me the second you are alone. This had better be some kind of sick cosmic joke. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed back. Me not a joke. He thinks you're his shark. He doesn't know you're my best friend. The house is a war zone. I'll call you tomorrow from the park. Her reply was instantaneous. Clara, good. Don't say another word to him. Not one. We play this my way now. A wave of relief so profound it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. I wasn't alone. The cold, steely thing that had formed in my chest now had a name. It was resolve. And it now had an ally. The next morning I moved through our home like a ghost. Julian was already up, dressed in an expensive suit, looking every bit the tragic hero heading off to battle his financial demons. He tried to give me a sympathetic look. I'll be tied up with the lawyers and accountants all day, he said, adjusting his tie. Trying to salvage what I can. I just nodded, my face a perfect mask of numb grief. Okay, Julian. Clara Vance will probably call you today to introduce herself and explain the process. Be cooperative, Alara. It'll make things easier. I will, I said. The moment his car pulled away, I grabbed my coat and walked to a small park a few blocks away. I sat on a cold, damp bench, the morning air crisp against my cheeks, and I dialed Clara's number. She picked up on the first ring. Alara, she said, her voice a low, controlled fury. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. And I did. I told her about the volatility, the late nights, the sale of the lake house, the liquidation of my art collection. I told her about his performance the night before, the hollow words of protecting me, the calculated cruelty of it all. As I spoke, the story poured out of me, not with tears but with a chilling precision. I was no longer a grieving wife. I was a witness giving testimony. Clara listened without interruption. I could picture her in her sleek, minimalist office leaning forward, her mind, a finely tuned legal machine, processing every detail, identifying every inconsistency, every potential lie. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. That absolute grade son of a bitch, she finally breathed. Her anger was a warm blanket. He's not just divorcing you. He's trying to defraud you. This bankruptcy is a complete fabrication. It's a classic maneuver. Feign insolvency, get the spouse to agree to a pittance in the settlement, and then magically recover, once the ink is dry, with all the assets safely hidden away. I know, I said quietly. I felt it. But what can we do? He thinks you work for him. A low chuckle came through the phone. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Oh, that's the beauty of it, Alara. That's the part that makes this a masterpiece. I do work for him. He signed a retainer. He is officially my client. And as his lawyer, I have a fiduciary duty to advise him to the best of my ability. I was confused. But how does that help me? Because, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as his lawyer, I will be privy to every single document he thinks proves his bankruptcy. He is going to hand-deliver the evidence of his own fraud directly into my hands. He's going to pay me, handsomely I might add, to build the case that will eventually destroy him. It's poetic. It's perfect. A slow smile spread across my face. He called you a shark, Clara. He has no idea, she replied grimly. He thinks he's hired a great white to go after a goldfish. He doesn't realize that shark has been friends with the goldfish for 20 years and is about to turn on its master. Now listen to me very carefully. This is what we're going to do. And so began the next phase of my life. I was no longer just Alara, the art historian. I was a spy in my own home. My life became a meticulously choreographed performance. To Julian, I was the broken, compliant wife, too grief-stricken and unsophisticated to question the legal proceedings. I was meek. I was sad. I asked few questions and signed whatever preliminary documents he, via Clara, told me to sign. Every evening, he would come home and give me a weary update on the collapse. He'd talk about creditor meetings and liquidation schedules. I would listen, nod, and offer him a cup of tea, all the while taking mental notes of every name, every company, every scrap of information he let slip. Then, late at night, after he was asleep, my real work would begin. I'd slip into his study, my heart pounding in my chest. Armed with a list of keywords from Shell Corporation's offshore accounts, wire transfers, I would carefully go through his laptop, his files, his desk drawers. I became an expert at reading financial statements, at understanding the labyrinthine world he had built to hide his wealth. Clara guided me every step of the way. Our late-night calls were our war room sessions. He mentioned a consulting fee to a company called Apex Solutions. I'd whisper into the phone from the pantry, "I can't find any record of what they do." "Give me the name," Clara would say. "I'll have my forensic accountant run a check. My bet is it's a shell company registered to his brother or his old college roommate." She was always right. We discovered a world of deceit that was far more intricate than I could have imagined. There was Serenity Holdings, an LLC registered in Delaware, which had purchased a beachfront condo in Florida 6 months ago. The owner, Julian's recently widowed aunt, a woman who hadn't left her nursing home in Ohio for 5 years. There was a series of wire transfers, disguised as capital investments, to an account in the Cayman Islands. And there was my art collection. Clara, through a contact in the art world, tracked it down. It hadn't been sold to a private buyer at a generous price. It was sitting in a climate-controlled storage unit in New Jersey, rented under a corporate name. He was just waiting to reclaim it after the divorce. With each discovery, my heartbreak was slowly, methodically replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer about a failed marriage. This was about justice. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and the years of trust one had so foolishly invested in him. Clara, in the meantime, was playing her role to perfection. She was the consummate professional. She would call Julian with updates, her tone crisp and efficient. "Mr. Hayes, I've reviewed the preliminary asset declarations. We'll need to be thorough to present a convincing case of insolvency to your wife's counsel." She hired a low-cost, slightly overwhelmed legal aid lawyer for me, someone Julian would see as no threat. Julian was ecstatic. "Clara is brilliant," he told me one evening over a dinner I could barely swallow. "She's so aggressive. Your little lawyer won't know what hit him. She's going to make sure this is all settled quickly and cleanly." "That's good," I said, looking down at my plate. "A clean break is for the best." He believed he was in complete control. He was the puppet master pulling all the strings. He had no idea that his shark, his brilliant lawyer, was meeting with me every week in a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town, feeding me the very documents he was providing her. We were building our case using his own materials. We had copies of the fraudulent bankruptcy filings, the deeds to the hidden properties, the statements from the offshore accounts. We had everything. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that sealed his fate, was something I found by sheer chance. I was packing up some of his old things from the attic, part of my performance as the departing wife. In a box of his college memorabilia, tucked inside a tattered copy of The Great Gatsby, I found a small black ledger. It wasn't for business. It was personal. In his neat, architectural handwriting, he had detailed his entire plan. It was all there. A timeline for selling assets, notes on which friends and family members to use for shell corporations, and a projected net worth he expected to have after the divorce and bankruptcy. He even had a name for his little project, written on the first page: Operation Phoenix. The arrogance was staggering. He was planning to rise from the ashes of a fire he had set himself. I photographed every single page and sent it to Clara. Her response was a single word: checkmate. The day of the final mediation arrived. It was a cold, clear day in November. The sky was a pale, unforgiving blue. We met in a sterile conference room on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The view of the city was spectacular, but I felt completely detached from it. Julian was there with Clara. He looked relaxed, confident, even a little smug. He gave me a brief, pitying nod, as if we were two acquaintances passing on the street. I was there with my legal aid lawyer, a young, earnest man named Mr. Peterson, who looked suitably nervous. The mediator, a stern-looking woman named Ms. Albright, sat at the head of the table. The proceedings began as expected. Clara, in her role as Julian's counsel, laid out the case for his tragic financial ruin. She presented binders full of documents showing the firm's collapse, the mounting debts, the catastrophic losses. She was magnificent. Her delivery was somber, professional, and utterly convincing. Julian sat beside her, nodding gravely, playing the part of the fallen titan. And so, Clara concluded, turning a page, given Mr. Hayes's declared insolvency, and in the interest of a swift and amicable resolution, we are proposing a settlement. Mr. Hayes will assume all listed debts. Mrs. Hayes will walk away free and clear, with no claim to future liabilities. She will retain her personal effects and a one-time payment of $25,000 for relocation and transitional expenses. Ms. Albright, the mediator, looked over at me and my lawyer with an expression of professional sympathy. Mr. Peterson shifted his papers nervously. Julian leaned back in his chair, the picture of magnanimity in defeat. This was it, the moment he had been working towards for over a year. There was a long, heavy silence in the room. I took a slow breath. I looked directly at Julian. His eyes met mine, and for a second he seemed to see something different in them. Not grief, not defeat, just stillness. Then Clara cleared her throat. However, she said, her voice suddenly changing, losing its somber tone and taking on a sharp, steely edge. There are a few additional assets that seem to have been omitted from Mr. Hayes's initial disclosure. I believe, in the interest of full transparency, we should add them to the marital pot for division. Julian sat bolt upright. He shot a confused look at Clara. What are you talking about? There's nothing left. Clara ignored him, her gaze fixed on the mediator. She slid a new, much thicker binder across the table. Let's begin with the property. A condominium in Naples, Florida, purchased 6 months ago for $1.2 million by a Delaware-based LLC called Serenity Holdings. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The sole director of this LLC is an Amelia Hayes. Mr. Hayes, isn't that your aunt's name? Julian's face went pale. That's her private business. It has nothing to do with me. Really? Clara said, raising an eyebrow. She slid another document across the table. It was a bank statement. Because the down payment for that property was funded by a wire transfer from a Cayman Islands account. An account which my forensic accountant has traced back to a series of consulting fees paid out by your firm just before its unfortunate collapse. Julian started to stammer. This is an outrage. You're my lawyer. What are you doing? My duty, Mr. Hayes, Clara said coldly, is to the truth, and to the court. Knowingly presenting fraudulent documents is a felony. I'm merely correcting the record before we all find ourselves in very serious legal jeopardy. She didn't stop. One by one, she laid out his deceptions like a surgeon laying out her instruments. She brought up the art collection, complete with the address of the storage unit and the corporate name it was rented under. She brought up shell companies named after his childhood pets. She brought up a brand new sports car he had purchased and registered in his brother's name just last month. With each revelation, Julian shrank in his chair. The color drained from his face, replaced by a blotchy, panicked red. His smug confidence evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, cornered animal. He kept looking from Clara's implacable face to my calm one, his mind unable to comprehend how his perfectly constructed world was being dismantled, piece by piece, by the very person he had hired to protect it. The final exhibit was the little black ledger. Clara didn't even slide it across the table. She simply held it up. And finally, she said, her voice ringing with authority, we have Mr. Hayes's personal journal, or should I say his business plan. He calls it Operation Phoenix. It's a fascinating read. It details his entire strategy to defraud his wife and hide millions of dollars in marital assets. She opened it to a random page. I particularly enjoyed the part where he estimates his post-divorce net worth at just over $8 million, while budgeting $25,000 to deal with Alara. That was you, Mr. Hayes, wasn't it? Dealing with me. Her eyes for the first time flashed with personal fire. Julian made a choking sound. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning horrific understanding. You, he whispered. This was you. I didn't say a word. I just gave him the same small, slow smile I had given him in our living room months ago. The smile he had so fatally misunderstood. Miss Albright, the mediator, looked as if she had been carved from stone. She closed the binder Clara had given her with a sharp final thud. She looked at Julian with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice like ice. Given this new information, I suggest you have a conversation with your counsel. I believe your initial settlement offer may need some significant revision. In fact, I believe you are in a position to be extraordinarily generous. If that is, you wish for Operation Phoenix to remain a private document between us, rather than evidence in a criminal fraud investigation. The rest was a blur of frantic, whispered negotiations. Julian, utterly broken, agreed to everything. I received 70% of the total, actual marital assets, including the full value of the hidden properties and accounts. The brownstone was to be sold, with the proceeds going to me. He was left with his company's legitimate debts and a fraction of the fortune he had tried to steal. He was a ruined man, not by bankruptcy, but by his own greed and by the fatal underestimation of the woman he had married and the friend he had hired. As we packed our briefcases to leave, he looked at me one last time, his face a mask of bitter defeat. Why? He rasped. Clara, she was your friend. Yes, she is, I said, my voice quiet and clear. And you, Julian? You were my husband. You taught me that anything can be rebuilt if you can see the potential underneath the damage. You were right. I just needed to clear away the debris first. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. I didn't feel triumph, not in the way you might think. I didn't feel a rush of victorious adrenaline. I felt quiet. I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. It was about taking a story that was written to destroy me and writing my own ending. I walked out into the cold November air, looked up at the pale blue sky, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. Thank you for listening to my story on her revenge arc. It's a strange thing, Justice. It's not always loud and fiery. Sometimes it's quiet, methodical, and meticulously planned. It's about reclaiming not what you've lost, but what was rightfully yours all along. Your dignity, your strength, and your future. Now I'd like to ask you, have you ever had a moment in your life where you had to stop being the victim of a story someone else was writing and become the author of your own? Let me know your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this story satisfying, please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to her revenge arc for more stories of justice served. Until next time, be the author.